Okay, so we're going to continue talking about dividing polynomials, and in this lesson we're going to talk about how do we use long division to divide polynomials. So in our two parts, this first part we'll talk about long division, and next time we'll talk about synthetic division. So in order to use long division of polynomials, you need to remember how to long divide regular numbers. So how do we take 365 divided by 12? So let's do that. So remember, you start by writing this, and we put a 12 over here. Okay, and then we would say, how many times does 12 go into 36? And we'd say, oh, that's 3 times. And we get 36. We draw a line, we subtract. We have 0 here, so now we're going to bring down this 5, okay? And then we'd say, how many times does 12 go into 5? Well, 0 times, so this would give me 0. I would subtract, and I would have 5 left over. And then when you were back in your elementary days, you wrote 30 and then remainder 5. But then as you got a little older, then you started to learn how to write this as a mixed number, 30 whole, and then you had the remainder over the divisor, okay? And so your remainder is 5, and that would go over your divisor 12. So you would have 30 and 5 12ths. You would make sure that this is reduced, and that was how you long divided. Hopefully you remember that a little bit. Okay, so how do we use long division to divide polynomials? Let's just go through yet another one here to make sure that we feel pretty comfortable with long division, as it will come into play. So the first thing, once again, is you're going to want to say, all right, 874 divided by 18. And you're going to say then, how many times does 18 go into 8? None. So 18 into 87. You might have to use your calculator if you're not sure. You go, well, 18 times what? And you just take some guesses to start if you're not sure. Let me just pull this up here. And you say, okay, well, let's try 18 times 5 is a little too big. So that means it's going to be 18 times 4. So that's 72. Okay, so I want to put a 4 there because 90 is a little bigger than 87. So let's go back to our problem. So we know here I can't use 5. I've got to use a 4. Now I'm going to put that above the 87, the second number there. So now 4 times 18 gives me 72. Okay, draw your line, and you remember you subtract. And then this would give me 15. And then now I'm going to bring down that 4. That would come right here. And then we would say, okay, now you're going to say 18 goes into 154 how many times? So 18 goes into 154. You might have to play around again with your calculator. Just try it out. Go 18 times 9. A little too big. 18 times 8, 144. So that'll work. It's going to be 8 then. Okay, and we go 8 times 18 was 144. And we subtract. And we had 10 left over. Okay, now again, this is called the dividend. This is your divisor. And your answer was called the quotient, okay? So when we write our final answer, we have 48 whole pieces, right? 48 wholes. It's a mixed number. And then you take your remainder, which is 10, and that goes over your divisor, which is 18. Okay, and then I would reduce the 10 18ths, so I'd end up with 48 and 5/9. So this would be my answer, and that's how we long divide. Now, the reason we're going through this is because this comes into play, the same kind of steps when we are using long division of polynomials. So let's take a look at how this works. So on the left is 277 divided by 12. Notice when you do this, you get 23 as your quotient. You have a remainder of 1. Now, on the right is the same thing, but written in polynomial form. You'll notice 1, 2, my divisor, 12. This has a coefficient of 1, and there's 2, okay? And then my dividend on the left is 277. Well, right here is also 277. If you look at the quotient, or the dividend there, you can see the coefficients are 2, 7, and 7. And you'll notice that all the way down, they match up. You'll see 24 here, you see 2 and 4 here. 37, right? They match up, and I get a remainder the same way. Now, when I write my answer for these, I'm going to write 2x plus 3. Now, when we do this over here, we write 23 and 1/12. And it's assumed that these are tied together. They're sort of like added together. But that's not really assumed here, so we have to put a little plus sign here. There's no mixed number thing. So we have to put a 1, and now we're going to put that over the divisor. Now the divisor is x plus 2. So this is how we would write our fractional part with this. Don't forget that little plus sign, and don't forget your divisor. But that's how you do it. But notice how tied and close these are. And we're going to do the same process here. So here we go. One thing you need to know before you divide polynomials is that you need to make sure your divisor and your dividend, okay, are both in standard form, okay? And then also, if there's any missing terms, you need a placeholder 0. It might be the x term is gone, so you're going to use 0x. It might be the x squared term is not there, so you're going to use 0x squared. Could be something bigger. Just make sure if you're missing any terms, use 0 as a placeholder. Okay. So, long division, 15x squared plus 8x minus 12 divided by 3x plus 1. Now, both of these you can see are in standard form, and this has degree 2, 1, 0. There are no missing terms. I've got an x squared, an x, and then a constant. And same thing with the other one, so we're good. There's no missing terms here. So now I'm just going to go, I'm going to write 15x squared plus 8x minus 12. And that's going to get divided by 3x plus 1. Okay, here we go. Now you're going to start with just how many times does 3x go into 15x squared? In other words, 3x times what gives me 15x squared? So 3x times 5x gives me 15x squared. Just remember, this times this should give you this. That's really what you're kind of thinking. Okay, so now when I put that 5x up there, now I'm really taking this just to get what that is. We had to say 3x times what gives me 15x squared. But now once you put something up top, now you are going to multiply it by both of these things here. So, and write them underneath. So 5x times 3x is 15x squared. But it's really 5x times also this 1. So I'm going to say 5x times 1 is 5x. Okay, now just like before, what are we doing? We are subtracting. But I'm going to put this in a little parentheses here because it's this whole thing that we're subtracting. Remember when we subtract, yeah, you just keep in mind your signs. 15x squared minus 15x squared is 0. X squared or 0. And then 8x minus 5x is 3x. Now be careful that you look over here and you remember you're subtracting, because it's very easy to say this is 13x and accidentally add those together, and that would be wrong. So just take your time with that and keep that in mind. Okay, so now I'm going to bring down this negative 12. That's going to go right here. Okay, and now I'm back to figuring out how many times does 3x go into just 3x. Just look at the first terms to start. 3x into 3x gives me 1 time, right? So that would go in there once because 1 times 3x is 3x. So now 1 times 3x gives me 3x. And now 1, so remember I'm kind of doing this and I'm going to write them both down here. Okay, so 1 times 1 now is 1. And then we're going to subtract these. Now here's where you have to be careful. This is negative 12 minus 1, which is negative 13. Make sure you don't accidentally write 11 there. Negative 11, that's very easy to do, and that would be wrong. Remember, you're subtracting. So just be careful. We went through kind of just changing the signs and everything on that. So that's another way to do it. Now I'm going to write my answer, and my answer would be 5x plus 1. Now I'm going to write my remainder, which is negative 13. So you can just write minus here since it's negative. Minus 13 over the divisor, which is 3x plus 1. Make sure you have this sign in between. It should be plus or minus. So my answer is 5x plus 1 minus 13 over 3x plus 1. And that is how we long divide. Takes a little getting used to, and it takes a little practice. So just take your time and you'll be okay. All right, we're going to try another one. And here we go. This one is clearly not in standard form, and there's also some missing terms. So I'm going to start by rewriting my divisor. I don't have, let's see, 2y to the third would be first, minus y squared. And now I don't have a y term, so I'm going to need a placeholder. I'm going to write that in a different color. I don't have a y term, so I'm going to say plus 0y, and then plus 25. Okay, now I'm going to divide that by y minus 3. Okay, so again, it's important that you have this term right here, that you don't forget that missing term. Okay, that's a placeholder that we need to have there, and also make sure both of those are in standard form. Okay, so that's super important. Make sure you always check for that before you start dividing. All right, now when you start, again, you're just going to use just the first terms. This is 1y goes into this how many times? So how many times does y go into 2y to the third? In other words, y times what gives me 2y to the third? Well, it would be 2y squared, right? Okay, so 2y squared, now I'm going to take that times my divisor, and I'm going to write it right here, okay? So 2y squared times y should give me 2y to the third. That's what we wanted. And now I've got to do 2y squared times negative 3, so that would give me negative 6y squared. Okay, and we are subtracting. Now be careful here. This is, remember, really a 1 here. So negative 1 minus negative 6. So negative 1 minus negative 6. Remember, that really means plus. So this is really going to give me 5y squared, positive 5y squared. So, all right, let's just go back and write. So we're going to write that. Take your time with this part. If you get confused here, then it could mess up the whole thing. So really take your time. So now we're going to bring down this 0y. Okay, and now we're going to say how many times does y go into 5y squared? And that would be a positive 5y. So y times 5y would give me 5y squared. So now I'm going to, once I put something up here, you're going to multiply by this, all right? So 5y times y is 5y squared. And then 5y times negative 3 would give me negative 15y. Draw my line and subtract. Again, I put in parentheses. Now, what is 0y minus negative 15y? So 0 minus negative 15 is positive 15. So this would be positive 15y. And I'm going to bring down now my positive 25. Okay, and now I'm going to go back. So now that I've brought that down, now I go back to how many times does y go into 15y? Well, that would be 15 times, right? It'd be positive, so it'd be plus 15 up here. And once I put something up top, I'm now going to take this times this and write it down here. Always that process. So 15 times y is 15y. And then we're doing 15 times negative 3, which would be negative 45. Okay, don't forget you are subtracting. So once again, you're going 25 minus negative 45. Okay, if you're not good with that, that really means 25 plus 45, which is 70. It's kind of weird, so remember your integer things, but don't forget to look here. Okay, so this is now pretty much my answer. I'm going to write 2y squared plus 5y plus 15. And now I'm going to put that plus sign. And then my remainder is 70. That goes over my divisor, which is y minus 3. This is my answer. We've just divided two polynomials using long division a couple of times. It takes some practice. You have 6 questions. I tried to space them out. There is a front and a back to that, but this gives you some practice with it. Make sure you do that. Write it into your planner, and once you've submitted to Schoology, check it off. Good luck.